Hey y'all, it's Miss A. Today our micro lesson is for 6.2b, which is identifying numbers, opposites, and absolute values. I think y'all found this really easy. It's one of the easier teaks that we cover in 6th grade. All right, so number 1 says fill in the missing information in the table. So we have a column for the number, then we have a column for the opposite of that number, and then the absolute value of the number. So right here it tells us that absolute value is the distance a number is from 0 on a number line. And it's always positive, no matter what. Absolute value is always positive because it just measures how far away it is from 0. So if we look at the number -2 and the number +2, -2 is 1, 2 places away from 0. +2 is 1, 2 places away from 0. So the absolute value for each of them is +2. All right, it's never negative. Absolute value is always positive. Very, very simple. All right, so let's start here. A, we're given the number -31, so the opposite of -31 would just be +31. And then the absolute value of either one of these numbers is 31, because the absolute value is always positive. And the absolute value is represented by these bars that look like this with the number in between it. So like the absolute value of -31 will look like that. Absolute value of -31 is 31, and the absolute value of 31 is 31. Again, absolute value is always positive. All right, 3/4, so the opposite would be -3/4. The absolute value, though, would be 3/4, because again, it's always positive. This one, they didn't give me the number, they gave me the opposite. So the opposite of -24 would be 24. The absolute value is 24 also. Okay, here they gave me the number +8. So the opposite would be -8. And the absolute value would be 8. Now this one, you can do either one. I'm going to keep the number as the positive. So if the absolute value is 11, then the number is 11. And the opposite would be -11. So the opposites are just positive versus negative. And the absolute value is always, whatever that number is, positive. All right, section 2 says use the number line to answer the questions. So we've got this number line here. We've got a couple points at +3 and +4.5. Because it's in between 4 and 5. This would be -3. And this is between -4 and -5. So this is -4.5. Go ahead and have those labeled so we know what they are. These were easy to see because they're just on the number. It says which point represents absolute value, that's what those bars are, the absolute value of -4.5. So if we are solving for the absolute value, we know we're not looking at the negative number. So we know it's definitely not A or B because absolute value is always positive. So the absolute value is 4.5, which we've already identified as point D. Had to be C or D, but C was at 3, which it's not. Has to be that number. Which 2 points have an absolute value of +3? So the absolute value is 3. So that could be -3 has the absolute value of 3, or +3. So that is B and C. Which point shows the opposite of -3? So the opposite of any negative is just that number as a positive. So the opposite of -3 would be 3. So we find 3, so that is point C. All right, number 3, Martin wrote an integer. The opposite of this integer is 17. So if he wrote a number down, we don't know what the number is yet, but we know the opposite of that number is 17. So what's the opposite of 17? -17. So that has to be the number he wrote. That just has to be. Because the opposite was positive, he had to write the negative. Determine if the following statements are true or false. Circle true or false. So the integer is 17. Nope, we've already said that the integer had to be -17. So that is false. Because the opposite can't be the same number. The opposite can't be the same. The integer is -17. Yes, we've already addressed that. If the opposite is positive, then the number he picked had to be negative. The absolute value of the integer is 17. That's true because the absolute value is always positive. The absolute value of the integer is -17. Nope, that's false because the absolute value is never negative. And that is it, guys. That's all we have to do today about absolute value and then opposites. Remember, opposite is just the negative versus the positive. So if they give you a negative, the opposite is a positive and vice versa. And absolute value is just how far away a number is from 0. So it's whatever that number is as a positive. Absolute value is never negative. Never, ever negative. Be careful on your micro assessment today. They give you a question like this, and they give you a question like this, but it's just multiple choice. Pay attention. Remember, absolute value is always positive. So just because you see a negative doesn't mean you pick a negative number, okay? Because the absolute value has to be a positive number. And just pay attention to it carefully. And then same thing down here. Like we knew what his number was before we even answered any of these questions. All right? If y'all have any questions, if y'all need help with anything while you're working on any of it, please don't hesitate to ask. Y'all know my Zoom is open from 9:30 to 4:30 with the exception of lunch and PLC. So if I'm not on there at that time, just try again at a different time or send me an email in Canvas. Y'all have a great day. Don't forget to do your practice problems. Pick one of the pages, take a picture of your work and send it to me, or join me on Zoom and show me your work. And that's good enough. But make sure you get that micro assessment done. It's only 2 questions today. Y'all have a great day, and I will talk to y'all later. Bye, guys.